what it is going on in this lesson now. Nelson Mandela is sharing with you, he is sharing with the readers how lot many struggles he had to face during this journey of freedom, during this long walk to freedom. Then he shares with you that how he didn't understand the real meaning of freedom earlier. But with the passage of time, as he grew, he realized that he is deprived of the freedom which a citizen of a society, a respectable citizen of a society should enjoy. Earlier, he thought that simply going around, going with mother, swimming in the stream, running and playing with friends in the village, that was freedom. But when he grew, then he learned what his freedom was. Because till then, whenever he had been doing these very activities, like he was going with his mother somewhere, he was swimming in a local pond, or he had been eating corns from here and there, or he had been chasing the moving bulls, etc. He wasn't stopped. He wasn't stopped, and he was very happy. He was enjoying this. He thought, oh, what fun, what freedom he is enjoying. But when he grew up, then he realized how he had been deprived of his freedom and rights, which he actually needed to grow himself. So here in the next passage, this is what he is going to talk about, right? It was only when I began to learn that my boyhood freedom was an illusion, when I discovered as a young man that my freedom had already been taken from me, that I began to hunger for it. You see, in the previous paragraph, he said, I was not born with a hunger to be free. Right from the beginning, he didn't have this strong urge to get freedom. Because in the childhood, he had been enjoying all kinds of freedoms. But when he grew up as a young boy, then he realized that the freedom which he thought was the freedom, which he thought that he was enjoying freedom, that was actually an illusion. Illusion meaning it was fake. It was fake. How? It appeared to be, it looked real, but it wasn't real actually. That was not the actual freedom that he was enjoying. As a young man, he realized that his freedom had already been taken from him. How, as a young man, he realized that his freedom had been taken from him? Because he didn't have the right and freedom to go to a school of his choice. He didn't have the freedom to pick up the course of study of his own choice. He didn't have these freedoms. Why? If he wanted to go to one particular school, he would be barred from going, telling him it's meant only for whites. Blacks cannot go. A particular course in the school or in the university, blacks cannot study, only whites can study. In fact, the institutions were segregated for the blacks and whites. Then he realized that his freedom of his choice, it had been snatched from him. He does not have that. And you know what happens, Anmol? When we don't have something, then we strive for that. Then only we have a hunger to achieve it. Hunger to achieve it meaning a strong desire, a strong urge, a strong feeling. I have to achieve it somehow. So he says, then he realized that he was deprived of freedom. And then he started striving. Then he started having this strong desire that freedom I would get. And when he said, I began to hunger for it, it is freedom here. It didn't mean that he had been, he had wanted that freedom for himself only. No. He wanted the freedom for all youngsters of his age in South Africa. Because he never wanted what he suffered, they should also suffer, right? The transitory freedoms of being able to stay out at night, read what I pleased, and go where I chose. Sorry. He says, at first, as a student, I wanted freedom only for myself. He said initially, he wanted the freedom for himself. Why initially he wanted the freedom for himself only? Because by then, the horizon of his mind had not widened. Because his outlook has not broadened at that time. So he thought of himself that he should be getting the freedom to stay out at night. He should be getting the freedom to read what he liked. He should be given the freedom to go wherever he wants. So these freedoms were transitory, short-lived. Why short-lived? Because afterwards he knew that certain areas were prohibited for blacks. Again, he would not be allowed to go. But later on, as a young man in Johannesburg, I yearned for the basic and honorable freedoms of achieving my potential, of earning my keep, of marrying and having a family, the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. He says when he became a young man, then he yearned, then he wanted, then he strived, then he desired for a basic and honorable freedom. He wanted that freedom that could give him honorable, meaning that could give him a dignified life, where he would not be treated as a black, where he should be treated as a citizen of South Africa. This is the kind of freedom he wanted. Freedom of achieving my potential, of earning my keep. He wanted to earn his own livelihood in a dignified way, of marrying and having a family. He wanted the freedom not to be obstructed in a lawful life. He never wanted any such thing that would be considered unlawful. He wanted the freedom in a lawful manner, meaning he wanted the freedom to be given by the Constitution of South Africa, where there would be provision of rights and freedoms for blacks also. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
But then I slowly saw that not only was I not free, but my brothers and sisters were not free. When he grew up, when he turned maturer, when he looked around, he could understand, he realized, he found that it was not only he who had no freedom, but his brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters does not mean his siblings only. Brothers and sisters meaning the fellow citizens of the society. He found that all the blacks, they did not have that freedom. They were deprived of that freedom. I saw that it was not just my freedom that was curtailed, but the freedom of everyone who looked like I did. Try to understand. He realized that it was not only that his freedom was curtailed, meaning his freedom was snatched away from him, but all those who looked like him. What does it mean?
Ma'am, all black peoples.
Right, all black people. But all the blacks, boys and girls, they were deprived of their freedom. So that made him understand, oh, this is discrimination. This is racial bias. There is discrimination. Whites have been given freedom, but blacks have not been given freedom. That is when I joined African National Congress. Then he decided that he should join African National Congress. You see what happens when you want to bring a change in the society, a political change in the society, when you want to change the system, then you have to attach yourself, you have to associate yourself with some organization like African National Congress. African National Congress was a political party that was working for the rights and freedoms of blacks only. So Nelson Mandela joined that African National Congress. That is when the hunger for my own freedom became the greater hunger for the freedom of my people. When he joined African National Congress, he says that my hunger for my desire for getting freedom had become stronger. Why stronger? Now this time it was stronger not for me only, but for all the blacks of South Africa. Now he had pledged, he had promised that he would definitely get the blacks their freedoms and rights equal to that of whites. It was this desire for the freedom of my people to live their lives with dignity and self-respect that animated my life, that transformed a frightened young man into a bold one, that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home, that forced a life-loving man to live like a monk. Try to understand, this is very important. He says it was this desire for the freedom of my people. It was a strong desire to get freedom for blacks in South Africa. It was a strong desire to get freedom to the blacks so that they could live their life with dignity and self-respect. This had become his purpose. The strong desire to get the freedom, this had become his purpose. This has become animated my life. This had become the goal of his life. This desire to get the freedom had given him a goal of his life. What was that goal of the life? To get freedom for the blacks. Now you see that Bhagat Singh, he had accepted death sentence at the hands of the Britishers. Why? Because he had a strong desire to get freedom to India. So his purpose, his goal was to get freedom even at the cost of his life, right? Now, this desire to get freedom to the people of South Africa, the blacks of South Africa, so that they could live with respect, this had given him a goal in life. This has transformed, this has changed Nelson Mandela completely. He was a frightened young man. He was afraid of the atrocities of Britishers. But now he has this desire to get freedom. It had made him triumph over those fears, and he had become bold. He had become brave. Now he was not afraid of meeting any consequences that drove a law-abiding attorney to become a criminal. That was a strong desire to get freedom to the blacks in South Africa, that from a law-abiding attorney, from an attorney, he had become a criminal. How criminal? At times, he had started violating the rules, the policies of the Britishers. Yes, it was needed. It was needed to boycott the Britishers, their policies, their rules, their laws, and that's how you could show them that you do not support what they want you to do. Non-cooperation movement, I hope you might have read in social studies, right? Non-cooperation movement was what? Gandhiji had led the people not to cooperate British government, but to flout their rules, not to accept. And by means of non-cooperation movement, when you are following a non-cooperation movement, then the freedom fighters, they were put into the prisons and they were called criminals. So that's how Nelson Mandela turned as a criminal according to the whites, that turned a family-loving husband into a man without a home. This man, he was a family man, but he had become homeless. Why? Because he could not live at his own home. If he lives at home, then he would be followed, he would be chased. Again, the British government, they would arrest him, put him behind the bars. So he was forced to live a life like a monk. Monk meaning the priest. Monk meaning the pilgrims, the religious people. Those who stay away from home to live a saintly life. I am no more virtuous of self-sacrificing than the next man. But I found that I could not even enjoy the poor and limited freedoms I was allowed where I knew my people were not free. He said he was no better. He was not self-sacrificing. Not like the ordinary people. He was no better than the ordinary people. He was like the ordinary human beings. Whatever the limited freedoms he was given, he said that he could not enjoy those very freedoms. Why? When he learned that many of his fellow blacks, they do not have those freedoms. How can you enjoy freedom when you know your siblings do not have those freedoms? How can you eat when you know that your neighborhood, that your next door neighbor is hungry, he doesn't have the food to eat? So this was his social bonding and emotional bonding with the blacks. That was out of his solidarity with the blacks. That he whatever little freedoms he had been given, he would not enjoy them because it was difficult for him to accept that. He said freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. Now this is very important. Freedom is indivisible. He said freedom is indivisible. How it is indivisible? It cannot be divided on the basis of race. It cannot be divided between the blacks and the whites. It is not something that can be divided, that these freedoms are given to blacks and these freedoms are given to whites. No, it is indivisible. It cannot be distributed. The chains on any one of my people. Now, what are these chains? The chains are the restrictions. Chains meaning restrictions here. Chains meaning lack of freedom here. He says that these restrictions on any one of the blacks, they were like restrictions on all of them. If one black was not free to do something, it means all blacks were deprived of that freedom. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me. And he said that if there were certain restrictions on my fellow black people, if the fellow black people were devoid of their freedom, then these restrictions were on me also. He felt that he has also lost some freedoms. Why? Because he would not consider himself an attorney. He would not consider himself as Nelson Mandela, the leader or the member of African National Congress. But he would consider himself as an ordinary black who, along with other blacks, has been deprived of his freedoms and has been imposed some restrictions. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. This is the most important statement here. I knew, he understood, that oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. Now, who is oppressor and who is oppressed? Oppressed is the victim. Oppressed are the blacks. Oppressed are those who are suffering, whose freedoms are curtailed, who have been imposed restrictions, who are being humiliated, who are being harassed, who are being tortured. They are oppressed. And oppressors are those who humiliate, who take away your freedoms, who give you atrocities, who torture you, who humiliate you, who harass you. He says, if oppressed is not free, the person who is oppressed is not free because his freedom is curtailed, his freedom is taken away by the oppressor. But Mandela says, even oppressor is also not free. He also does not enjoy freedom. He also does not have freedom. How? This is what he had explained. So what he means to say, if we work for the freedom of the oppressed, then we think that oppressor should also be given freedom. But oppressor should be given the freedom of what kind? Here is the answer. A man who takes away another man's freedom is a prisoner of hatred. So according to Nelson Mandela, oppressor is, first of all, before he takes away the freedom of another person, he himself is not free first. Why? Because he is the prisoner of hatred. He is bound by hatred. He is confined by hatred. This hatred compels him to humiliate or oppress others. If he is free from hatred, if he has got freedom from hatred, if he does not hate, if he stops hating, then what will happen? Then he would not oppress others. So first, oppressor has to be liberated, has to get the freedom. He is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. The oppressor, he is bound by the hatred. He is put into the prison. He is put behind the bars of prejudice. What kind of jail is this? It's not the jail which we call cell. It is not the jail made up like a room. This is the prison of prejudices, discrimination, and narrow-mindedness. The oppressor is narrow-minded. The oppressor is prejudiced. He is discriminating. He discriminates, that's why he hates. He hates, that's why he takes away others' freedom, without realizing that he himself does not have the freedom. Because hatred is not given you as out of freedom. You are compelled to hate. You are taught to hate. Hatred is nobody's choice actually, right? Nobody likes to hate. This is no one's choice. But we are made, we are forced, we are compelled. We are influenced to hate. I'm not truly free if I'm taking away someone else's freedom. Mandela says, if I take away someone's freedom, then I'm not free myself. Just as surely as I am not free when my freedom is taken from me. When my freedom is taken from me, I am like a slave. But when I take away others' freedoms, then also I am like a slave. Why? I am a slave of prejudice. I am a slave of hatred, narrow-mindedness. So where do I have the freedom? So that way I don't have the right to take away others' freedoms. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. He says that a person who is oppressed, if he is robbed of humanity, if he is deprived of humanity, humane behavior, then the oppressor is also robbed of his humanity. He also loses his humanity. When a person who is oppressed, the person who is humiliated, when he loses the humanity, the human treatment, then the person who is treating him inhumanly, he is also losing his humanity. So both of them are the sufferers. Both of them are alike. So if the one who is the slave wants the freedom, the other who enslaves also needs the freedom. So this is what he has tried to say, that we all are slaves that way, and we have to uplift ourselves. We have to broaden our outlook and thinking. And we have to curtail these barriers of discrimination and inequality. If we break these barriers, then only there can be equality, and then only we can give freedom to each other, and automatically we'll be able to give respect to each other. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Any doubt?
No, ma'am.
Sure?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. Then tomorrow we'll discuss these questions. Okay? And
Okay.
just go through the lesson, because there are a lot many statements and you can get questions, even MCQs with those statements. So if any statement which is not clear to you, you can ask me.
Okay, ma'am.
Right? And then tomorrow we'll take up these questions. Right?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, Jai.